Welcome to History Date Night, a World War II podcast covering the Second World War in chronological order, from the opening shots to final victory. I'm Justin, and joining me is my wife and co-host, Jenny. Together we explore the people, battles, and turning points that shape the deadliest conflict in human history, one date at a time. On this episode,
to direct any citizen to any job,
no one wishes to attack us,
the foulest and most soul-destroying tyranny. Welcome back to History Date Night. I'm Justin. Last episode, Churchill flew to Paris and got a chilling answer to his question. Gamelin's aucune. There is no reserve. While Guderian's panzers kept driving west, and de Gaulle led the only French counterattack of the war so far. This episode covers May 19th through the 22nd. The German spearhead reaches the sea, cutting the Allied armies in Belgium off from the rest of France entirely. We're also going to tell you about a new French commander whose grasp of the crisis is immediately questioned by the Belgian king.
I'm Jenny. This episode also has Churchill's first radio broadcast as Prime Minister, a British counterattack at Arras that battles Erwin Rommel, important progress at Bletchley Park against Luftwaffe Enigma traffic, and a British Parliament passing the most sweeping legislation in the country's history in less than 3 hours. Let's get into it.
May 19th in Paris, Reynaud formally sacks Gamelin and replaces him with General Maxime Weygand, recalling him from what had amounted to a quiet exile commanding French forces in Syria. The press greets the appointment with enthusiasm. Weygand was Marshal Foch's chief of staff in World War I, and his name still carries the weight of that earlier victorious conflict. What the newspapers don't dwell on is that Weygand is, by background and career, fundamentally a staff officer. He has never actually commanded troops in battle himself.
His first day on the job is spent almost entirely on ceremony. Formal visits to the French president and to cabinet ministers, exactly the kind of protocol Weygand's hero, Foch, would have observed. Only after that does he decide he should actually go see the front for himself, flying out to Ypres to meet the French, British, and Belgian commanders in person. During that meeting, King Leopold III of Belgium forms a sharply negative view of Weygand's grasp of the true military situation that the Allied armies are facing. It is a sobering private judgment delivered by a head of state about the man who has just been handed supreme command of the entire Allied war effort.
The following day, May 20th, Weygand does something that will have lasting consequences on the war. He suspends plans already in motion for Allied forces in the north and south to counterattack simultaneously and pinch off the exposed German armored columns, an operation that actually might have worked, since German infantry still hasn't caught up to the Panzer's breakneck advance. On May 21st, Weygand flies north again, meets with Belgian, British, and French commanders, and does issue his own version of an attack order. Belgian forces will cover the eastern flank while the rest of the Allied forces strike south towards Arras and Cambrai, attempting to take advantage of that gap between German tanks and German infantry.
It's a sound plan on paper, but coordination breaks down, and there's a far more serious accident this same period that removes another key commander, General Gaston Bilot, commanding the French First Army Group. The officer responsible for coordinating the Belgian, British, and French forces now trapped in the north is fatally injured on the night of May 21st when his staff car crashes into a truck on the road back from the EP conference. Bilot dies of his injuries 2 days later on May 23rd, at the exact moment unified command matters more than any other point in the entire campaign. The man holding that command is gone, and there is a gap before anyone effectively replaces him.
On May 19th in London, Winston Churchill delivers his first broadcast to the British people as Prime Minister. He doesn't try to disguise how serious the situation has become. He tells listeners that it would be foolish to hide the gravity of the hour and describes Nazism as, quote, the foulest and most soul-destroying tyranny that has ever darkened and stained the pages of history, end quote. But he does also offer a note of context. Only a very small part of the French army had actually been heavily engaged so far. He explains that he's formed a government of men and women from every party and almost every point of view. Quote, we have differed and quarreled in the past, he says, But now one bond unites us all, to wage war until victory is won, and never to surrender ourselves to servitude and shame, whatever the cost and agony may be." End quote. The speech takes its title, "Be ye men of valor," from a line in the Apocrypha's first book of Maccabees.
That same day, on the other side of the Atlantic, Charles Lindbergh makes another nationwide radio address arguing for American isolationism, telling listeners, quote, "We need not fear a foreign invasion unless American peoples bring it on their own through quarreling and meddling with affairs abroad. If we desire peace, we need only stop asking for war. No one wishes to attack us, and no one is in a position to do so." End quote. These two speeches are delivered on the exact same day, on opposite sides of the same ocean, about the exact same unfolding catastrophe.
And on that same day, General Lord Gort, commanding the British Expeditionary Force, makes a decision that will matter enormously in the weeks to come. With Guderian's forces now within 50 miles of the Channel, and the French Ninth Army effectively gone, Gort orders a withdrawal of British forces towards the port cities of the French coast, explicitly including a town most people listening this week have never heard of, but are about to become extremely familiar with: Dunkirk. Now you have to forgive me for this next part. There's a ton of French pronunciation. I'm going to do my best. But on May 20th, Guderian's panzer set off before dawn from the line of Cambrai and Péronne. Around 9 in the morning, the 1st Panzer Division, advancing on the left, captures Amiens, almost without a fight. Guderian himself is present to witness what he specifically calls a historic event. On the right, the 2nd Panzer Division pushes from Albert toward Abbeville, which, if you remember, is the town where the First Allied Supreme War Council met. They continue through Doullens and Bernaville, seizing Abbeville by 7 that evening. Again, excuse my pronunciations. From there, a single tank battalion pushes onward and at dusk reaches the sea itself, at a small town called Noyelles-sur-Mer. The panzer crews who had crossed the Meuse River barely a week before filled their lungs with the sea air and their eyes with the sight of the sea. It's a striking image. Soldiers who started this campaign fighting through supposedly impassable forest, standing on a beach on the English Channel 8 days later. When word of it reaches Hitler at his headquarters, General Jodl records that the Fuhrer was, in his words, quote, "beside himself with joy," end quote, already imagining victory and peace within reach. The French army is now cut cleanly in two, and has been fighting one part in the north around Belgium, entirely separated from everything else defending the rest of France.
That evening, though, brings a moment of confusion on the German side too. Guderian himself later writes, quote, "We did not know in what direction we were to continue to advance. General von Kleitz himself had no orders." End quote. May 21st is spent waiting. Guderian uses the pause to visit Abbeville and inspect the new Somme bridgehead. Orders finally arrive from German High Command late in the day. Swing north and take the Channel ports and Calais outright. Guderian immediately sends his 1st Panzer Division towards Calais and his 2nd towards Boulogne along the coast road. On his flank, General Reinhardt's corps is meant to push forward towards Saint-Omer, though at the pivot point of that whole movement, as we'll see, Holt's corps is about to run into trouble at Arras.
May 21st brings the sharpest check the German advance has faced anywhere in this entire campaign so far. British forces under Major General Harold Franklin, a scratch force that becomes known as Frank Force, built around 74 British Matilda tanks and elements of 2 infantry divisions, launch a counterattack south of Arras, aimed directly at Rommel's 7th Panzer Division as it pushes toward the town.
The Matildas are heavily armed enough that standard German anti-tank gun rounds bounce off them in the opening exchanges. Rommel's forces are surprisingly actually rattled. He's eventually forced to bring up his own division's 88mm anti-aircraft guns and use them in a direct anti-tank role. Flat trajectory fire against armored targets, a role that they were not originally designed for, but proved devastatingly effective at. It's the improvisation that finally stops the British attack, and it's a tactic German forces will lean on repeatedly for the rest of the war, once its effectiveness is proven right here.
There's details from the German side that show how much confusion this attack actually caused, which is quite out of proportion to its real size. Rommel genuinely believes in the moment that he's facing 5 full Allied divisions bearing down on him, when in reality he's actually facing 2 divisions and 2 tank battalions. General Halder, back at German High Command, is sufficiently alarmed by reports from Arras that he privately writes of the need to take the Arras High Plateau and expects what he calls a decisive battle lasting several days in this exact area. Though the Allies don't give it to him, they ultimately withdraw from Arras to avoid being encircled themselves. It's a tactical retreat and not a lasting victory. But, for a single day, an under-resourced British counterattack convinces one of Germany's most capable commanders that he's facing something much larger and more dangerous than what's actually there.
May 22nd sees the sieges of the Battle of Boulogne and the Siege of Calais. Both begin this day, as Guderian's panzers close in on both Channel ports. Holding those ports, even briefly, buys precious time for what comes next in the improvised Allied war plan.
In England this same day, Parliament passes the Emergency Powers Defence Act in less than 3 hours, what's described at the time as the most drastic legislation in British history, giving the government almost unlimited authority over the life, liberty, and property of every person in the country. Banks, munitions production, wages, profits, and working conditions all come under direct state control. Ernest Bevin, the new Minister of Labor and National Service, is granted what amounts to dictatorial powers to direct any citizen to any job the war effort requires. Immediately after, members of Parliament pass a companion Treachery Act, redefining and expanding the scope of acts now punishable by death as treason. Clement Attlee, in his first speech as Deputy Prime Minister, tells the country, quote, "Everyone should continue at their jobs until ordered otherwise," end quote.
There is also progress happening quietly the same period at Bletchley Park. Codebreakers at Hut 6 are reading Luftwaffe red key traffic with increasing success, aided by the new electromechanical Bomba machines that have begun to come into service. The machinery for exploiting Enigma is starting to work more reliably, even if turning decrypted messages into timely battlefield advantage remains a separate and difficult problem. As we've noted in earlier episodes, breaking a code and being able to use the resulting intelligence in time to actually matter are 2 very different things. But the underlying capability is strengthening.
Now, the darker side of German occupation is already rearing its ugly head. On May 22nd in northern France, an SS unit called Totenkopf, or Death's Hand, a formation originally raised to provide concentration guards, murders dozens of civilians in the towns and villages around Aubigny-en-Artois, as the unit advances towards the canal line before Dunkirk. This isn't combat, as these are civilians, killed as German forces pass through on their way to what's about to become one of the defining moments of the entire war. It's a preview of exactly the kind of conduct that will define the SS's reputation for the rest of the conflict.
And on May 21st, before the French Parliament, Reynaud himself addresses the deputies directly, describing the military situation honestly as a disaster, blaming what he calls incredible faults in the French High Command, and promising that they will be punished. But he closes with deliberate defiance. He says, "France cannot die. If a miracle is needed to save France, I believe in miracles because I believe in France." It is a striking thing to say publicly. In the same week, his own new commander-in-chief is already facing private doubts about his grasp of the crisis.
So, to wrap up, Weygand takes command of the entire Allied war effort and spends his first day on ceremonial visits before flying to a meeting where King Leopold of Belgium forms a sharply negative view of his understanding of the situation. Bilot, the one man coordinating the trapped Allied armies in the north, dies after a car crash at the worst possible moment. Churchill gives his first broadcast as Prime Minister the same day that Lindbergh argues for American isolationism on the other side of the ocean. And, on the same day, Gort quietly orders a withdrawal toward a port called Dunkirk. Guderian's tanks reach the English Channel and fill their lungs with sea air, cutting the Allied armies in 2. British Matildas at Arras convince Rommel that he's facing 5 full divisions instead of 2. And Britain passes the most sweeping legislation in its history in just under 3 hours, while Bletchley Park continues to strengthen its hold on Luftwaffe radio traffic.
Next episode, we'll follow what happens as the trapped Allied armies in the north look for a way out, and the word Dunkirk gains a new meaning of defiance and determination. Thanks for joining us on episode 39 of History Date Night. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you then.